Welcome to the Survivor Skaneateles reunion show. Can we hear it from the chat? Yeah. All right, so before we begin, there is a new face amongst us. I would like to introduce Frankie. She's going to be the main moderator of this reunion show. So Frankie, if you want to introduce yourself, go for it.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Frankie. First time caller, long time listener, basically. I think I was maybe one of the original super fans of this this going of Survivor. So I'm very happy to be here. And I'm happy to just ask a couple of questions about this season and happy to hear from everyone. So awesome. I think we're just gonna go ahead and then Kay will also chime in if needed for context. I wasn't there, I was just a viewer, so I'm kind of like the viewer's perspective, and then obviously Kay was running the show. So we're gonna start off with our amazing winner of Survivor Skaneateles, Jess. Congratulations.
Oh my God.
I know, crazy. So I think one of the main questions is last season, it was very evident, you're kind of like scrambling, playing from the bottom immediately after the merge. Obviously, this season went better for you. So how was your approach from last season different than your approach this season? How do you feel like you changed things up?
I didn't really go into either season with like a strategy that I was planning to enact. I like kept trying to come up with something like and prepare. But it's really one of those things where you just kind of have to like learn on the ground as you're going. But I think the biggest difference was having gone out in like a kind of vote out where I felt like there was like no path for me to get out of it. Um, Kind of led me to feel like the stakes were almost lower and I wasn't like playing as scared as I was the first time. So I think that like let me feel like I could take risks in different ways than I did the first season.
Awesome. And then just curious, we could do the raised hands. How many of you had an alliance with Jess at one point during this season? Yeah. So like more than half probably. And Jess, do you feel like you were at any point spreading yourself too thin, or was it like a lot of people to manage, or did you feel it went well for you with all of these connections you were making?
It didn't really feel like too much to manage. I think it did get a little bit complicated at the merge. Just with the like things I was saying to people. I think there was a lot of things that could have easily gotten back to the wrong people that were said. I don't like, as I said, I wasn't playing super safe. If people had just talked a little bit amongst themselves, I think my game would have been in the gutter. So I think that was probably the hardest part about like all the alliances, but I felt like having so many connections empowered me to play the game the way I did, and I felt like comfortable moving about the social scape of the game. So I don't feel like it affected the way that I was operating, but I do think that should something have gone sideways, it would have been right down for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It was very, as just from a viewer perspective, it was so funny because it would be like all of these people were just telling you things. It was so funny to watch. I was like, wow, Jess is really doing the darn thing, just like watching throughout the season. So congratulations to you again. We're gonna just keep it with our final three here. And then next question is for Allie. Hi, Allie.
Hi.
Yeah, so the question is, so much of your gameplay was kind of behind the scenes. A lot of, or many jurors didn't realize the moves that you were making until they watched the season. Was this your intention going into the game, or did that change as the game progressed?
That was my intention. I think like I said, kind of in my final tribal speech, I knew that I wasn't going to be viewed as like a competition threat because I'm just not very strong competitively. And I knew I had to rely on my social game. But I did know that I think I was a bit too loud and too out there in the first season, which bit me in the butt a bit. So I did want to seem a bit more under the radar this season so people wouldn't really think of me as a threat, and much more of my moves were, like I said, behind the scenes, and like Frankie said, behind the scenes. However, I do think that me being so under the radar didn't work in my favor because the jury didn't really think that there was a reason for me to be there at the time until, like you said, after watching the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a kind of clarifying question. If anyone wants to speak on this, just feel free to do so. Did anyone watching it back, did that change their, not necessarily like that you would have changed your vote, but did that change your perspective on how Allie in particular did play the game?
Oh, Max has his hand raised.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I did vote for you in the final three because from what you said during the final speech, it was like when things were starting to piece together in my mind, where I was like, okay, yeah, I did see that Jess and Zach were like a pretty big threat. I just didn't really do much about it. But I like you specifically, I feel like that behind the scenes stuff was really impressive because I always saw them as a threat, but like I not even once did I see you as a threat. So it was just like I felt that worked very well in your favor, and that's why I voted for you.
Thanks.
And I think Grant had something to share as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, before she even got to final three, she managed to outlast everyone on her tribe, and I think definitely compare the coconuts and the dolls. Dolls were much more willing to throw each other under the bus. So the fact that she's the one that came out on top, just kind of shows she did deserve to be there in the final three, and it definitely showed in the final edit. So,
Just take it away.
I also think, not that I was voting, obviously, but I think that Allie managing her threat level was a really big reason why I felt so comfortable being in a final two with her. And I think I had a bit more of a stronger confidence that I could beat her. I did start to sort of feel worried about that towards the end, but by that time it was like down to the fire making. But I think that was a huge reason why we were working together so closely, and I felt comfortable creating that strong relationship. So good job, Allie.
Thanks, guys. Tell me more nice things.
All right, Ella, add something, and then we're going to move on.
I think that Frankie, you mentioned that like some people maybe didn't see Allie's game until the edit, which definitely I like learned more, but I think Allie gave a really convincing speech. Like I think you actually laid it out pretty clearly, which is like personally why I didn't have to ask you a question, because I didn't have any questions about your game. It was very clear to me what you did. So nice job.
Great. Yeah, so we're just gonna keep it going with our final member of the final three, Zach. So the question that I have is, ultimately, do you feel that you made the right decision in taking Jess with you to the final three? Because there was definitely some space for you to do like big move, maybe villain move even. You and Jess are together through the whole thing, and then the last minute say, you can make fire instead of just, bringing Jess with you. So after everything is said and done, how do you feel about that decision?
Babe, we can't hear you.
Does that work better?
Yes.
Perf. So there's two kind of things. Like in my heart of hearts, that was the decision I was gonna make. I was terrified of making fire. I thought that Allie and Gabby were gonna be much better, and I think Jess was much better than they did end up being. And also just like we're not playing this game for money. We're pretty much playing this game for fun. So the
Right.
fact that we had worked together since day one in the last season, we were pretty much a duo. I was like, I can't have not like I just wanted one of us to win over anything. But then like if we were playing for money and it was cutthroat, like we did do a fire like for fun afterwards. And like I did win. So like that would have been so like much epic TV. But in that moment I was like, no, I need this moment with the two of us there at the end. And I'm still pleased that I did it, even though I didn't come out on top.
Yeah, and then just kind of as a straw poll. So say, for example, this is for everyone. So if Zach brought Gabby with him and then Allie won fire making, Kay, do you want to like lead to say who would have voted for who?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, obviously the arguments make a big impact on that, but just from what you had knowledge of at the time, like what would those vote breakdowns be? Like who would have voted for Zach in that instance? Just raise your hand. So it looks like Jess. Okay, what about Allie? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then Gabby, raise your hand if you want, if you would vote for Jess. So 2. So it looks like Allie probably would have wanted that scenario. But Zach does get more votes, which is interesting.
Right, interesting for sure. Yeah, awesome. So we're gonna just kind of transition to some questions for the larger group. And like we said, you can feel free. They'll be directed mostly at some people, but we're gonna just feel free to chime in if you have some more context. So, first question is for Mo, if you're able to share. I know you're having some issue, just kind of.
Yeah, I'm here and I have service. The road noise might be a problem.
Okay, so the question is just what it was like for you transitioning from being a player to being production in the game.
And Sarat can chime in after as well.
I know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed heckling people at the end of the flag challenge. I gave them some of my platitudes about the truth. So that was always fun. Oh shit, I'm going fast. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think maybe I enjoyed the production more than I enjoyed the actual challenges. But like, I only did like 1 or 2 challenges, so I don't really know. I had fun though. That's all that matters, right?
Right. Definitely less pressure in production. Definitely lends itself to a little more fun.
Yeah.
Sarat,
like I had no plans.
Sarat, do you have anything to share about your experience with that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as Frankie said, there was less pressure to like perform. I think for a large part of my time spent in production, I was more focused on like recovery. But after I was able to get myself back up together, I think it was just fun kind of picking and prodding and seeing what other people's thoughts were about who needed to go home, why they wanted to send someone else home. It was just really interesting to see how the stories were kind of either making sense or not making any sense at all. So
yeah, I mean, let's talk about your recovery, right?
Yeah.
So it was
we'll keep it at Sarat for a moment.
What was it like coming back into the game, like putting yourself back in the game mode after such a traumatic experience?
It was difficult because I knew that I would essentially be like grasping at straws to kind of like stay in the game. I think in terms of my strategy, I didn't really know how else to. I didn't have much leverage. I wasn't physically able to continue doing the challenges. And I don't know if I had the motivation to kind of play the mind games or build up like social capital in the same ways if I were kind of in the right state of mind to be able to do that. So it was tough. I used my Dylan card and it didn't work very well. But I think everyone, made the decision that was right for them. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Kay, do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about just from, a game creator perspective when something like that happens and a challenge that you've designed?
Yeah, the fact that it was the first thing that happened in the game did not set me up with a lot of confidence for the way that I designed the game. And I do feel like deep regret for not taking more like safety precautions, and like I'm glad that everyone is okay, but that's a learning experience for me for next time, or that I do plan this, that obviously the safety of everyone is like should be number one priority. And Sarat, I am so sorry, and I'm glad that you're okay.
Lovely. Wonderful. So I think if we have one more, we'll do one more individual question, then kind of a group question, then swing it back to some individual questions as well. So this question is for Grant. Grant, throughout the game, you made it clear that it was not your goal to be viewed as a schemer. Do you feel you were successful in that goal?
Yes, I have vindicated myself greatly. I had to scramble around a lot. It's kind of right from the very beginning, not being on a tribe, it's really, really difficult because those initial moments where people are walking around camp talking, very, very important in the game. That's really where you're going to make your alliances that's going to last the entire rest of the way. And myself and Mohammed both weren't there. We couldn't even really make an alliance between ourselves because we'd be split up. So you kind of had two paths you can go on. The first one was kind of sing it to the background, which kind of think is the path Mo took, which didn't go as far. And the other was just to scramble like hell to stay in any way you can. So that's kind of the way I had to go.
Sure. And obviously, whatever you were doing was working because you did make it far in the game, even after not having started out on a tribe. So there are, many players who do less, and more power to you for doing what you needed to do. The goal is to win the game, so you got to get there some way. Awesome. Yeah. So next topic of conversation, I believe you'd be remiss not to speak about, which is Bucketgate. So just a couple of questions surrounding Bucketgate, and mostly centered on the folks who were on that tribe. So in the moment when there was the suggestion of, hey, like let's take some shortcuts or what have you, what were your thoughts kind of as that was unfolding? Obviously, things were happening, tension, like the game was kind of just getting started. So if anyone is willing to speak on kind of what was going through their heads in that moment. Max.
Okay, so for me personally, I feel like my position was in the line of the buckets was like pretty difficult. I wouldn't say mine was the most difficult position. I'd probably say that did end up probably being Justin's position because he's the one who ultimately had to get it into the final bucket. But having to constantly like pull up the bucket and toss it and keep doing that back and forth just like really exhausted you after a long time. And especially after we lost some of our progress because of the unintentional moving forward that we did from just like natural movements that we didn't notice was really demoralizing. So once the other team had filled up their bucket and had gone up and so much time had passed, it was just like, well, like we're not really making a ton of progress. Like we're all getting exhausted. They're not really going anywhere. And at that point, I know for me, I was like, oh, there's probably no chance of us winning. So when the just like let's just say we didn't go, I was just like, whatever, I don't want to do this anymore because I was exhausted. So I didn't really have any intention of pretending like we like fully like won if like we went up there and somehow managed to beat them. But I was just like, I feel like what was going through my mind was that like if we went up and we're just like, hey, we quit while they were still in the middle of it, it kind of would have been an anticlimactic finish for them. That was my thought anyway. So because I figured they would want to finish the challenge and win, like the other team. So that's why I personally wasn't like, "Hey, we lost." I know I wasn't going to pretend that we won if we did happen to win. So
Yeah, interesting. I mean, once again, as a viewer, it's just like one of those things where it's like, well, you know, there's cameras on you, right? like obviously, like this is all going to come out in the wash. So I think it's definitely interesting to hear perspectives of just like thought process as it was unfolding. If anyone else wants to share too, who was involved. Justin.
Yeah, so as Max mentioned, like I was kind of in the middle there, and I didn't know what was going on in terms of like discussion, like even like talking to say like let's just give up. I was just going and hoping for and that we could do something. But when we did give up and that finally happened, I was happy. I did not want to go anymore. So because I was just exhausted, and I had no thought process about what to do after. I was just like, I'm done. So that was mostly for me.
Okay. Allie.
Yeah, so I was not actually doing any of the hard labor of the bucket situation. So I think that my word has a little bit less value here, but as it was happening, I did notice that like the people who were throwing the buckets were getting, like Max said, a bit demoralized, which is understandable. And then it all happened so fast, but then once the bucket was dumped out, I was like, oh, so we're just like giving up, which sucks, but it is what it is. Like, that's, I get it. They were really upset and tired, and I understand. And then when we kept going with the challenge, I was like, and then we saw that they were still at the ring toss, and we absolutely could have made up the time because they took so long on the ring toss. That's when I got a bit upset, and I am a stickler for the rules of a game, which is why I was such a snitch about it. Apologies. But yeah, so I was very surprised that we kept going after we had given up, because like I knew that there was no chance of winning. But I do understand Max's perspective of like what would have happened if we just like told everybody that we gave up. Like that's not a good look either. So, it was complicated in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Sure, Caroline.
Yeah, so I sat out of this challenge. So I was up there filming the whole time. And so when I was like watching the ring toss happen, I had no idea like they had like had water poured out of the bucket, like anything else, which like I got. But in the moment I was cheering them on. I was like, guys, you're in this. What are you doing? But then I heard after and I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Yeah, I have.
But it was it was just weird to go from that dynamic of like, guys, you're still in this, to then finding out everything and be like, wow, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just have a question. Zach mentioned earlier that this is like a game just for fun, right? Which is definitely true. But I guess my question is, you guys probably wouldn't have done that if it were actual Survivor, correct? I think we can all probably agree with that. Does the fact that this is kind of just a game for fun, does that lead to less of like a buy-in for taking these challenges more seriously? Ella?
Yeah. Oh, let's let Ella go first, just because I want to hear from everyone today. So,
I think for me, obviously, Bucketgate I wasn't in on that, but in terms of the endurance challenges, for me, I think I didn't see some of the value in like really pushing myself beyond my physical limit in a way that I know if $1 million were on the line, / I was going to be on national television, I think I would have pushed myself more. Like there were multiple challenges I think I gave up on personally, but other like team challenges, I'm there.
yeah, and I think that kind of just goes to the whole, it's a lot easier to do, like when you're doing something for yourself, it's a lot easier to make concessions and what you will and won't do. But I think when other people on a team are relying on you, like you don't want to be that person. Sure. And also just out of respect, like obviously all of you are friends, especially with Kay. Like Kay spends time making these things. So like you want to make sure that you're participating as much as possible. Max, did you have another addendum?
Oh yes. I do think if this were like, real legit, think specifically with Bucketgate, things would have gone a little bit different. Yeah, we probably would have still, just went until we lost. But not to throw anybody under the bus, but our camera person, Dominic, was also kind of like putting that idea into our heads to just kind of give up. So, and I think if it was a real scenario, like that wouldn't have happened. Or because I think it was a mixture of that going on, plus just like really wanting to not do it, just I think was not a good mix. And I think if that didn't happen, we probably would have, done our best, still lost, but it wouldn't have become the scandal that it became.
Right. And obviously Dominic's not here to, add context to this. So definitely appreciate you adding that context as well. It's a complicated situation. But happy we're able to just discuss more. And the last question that I have regarding that is just for players on the Platinum Dolls who hope to play again. Does that experience kind of change how you will approach things in the future if you do play future seasons of Survivor?
And I think I want to push Santino to answer this one. We've heard from everybody else.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, I can't deny it's definitely going to change how I play in the future. I mean, everybody already hit all the nails on the head. I knew I definitely had a big piece to play in that scandal as well, nudging towards the dark side. But it's like you guys said, it's like part game, and then if we don't take it as seriously as real Survivor. But at the same time, people don't factor in how much people suffered from that challenge, how cold it was, and just the repeated motions we had to go through, just bit by bit, inch by inch. It was very demoralizing. So I guess for future games, I got to go in with more of just an army mindset. You got to get down and dirty. You got to just put your nose to the ground and work for it, or else you're gonna get kicked behind.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into just talking about the toll that the game took on you. Obviously, R.I.P. Allie's toenail. hope all as well as that. But it being a 2-day game, some people might interpret that as, oh, it's just 2 days, but it's kind of boiled down into the intensity of a many day game, but just all at once, mentally, physically, spiritually, and all of that. So if anybody just want to talk more about the physical toll, mental toll, emotional toll that the game took on you, Zach.
I think that like it like definitely the first time that we played the first season at the end, I was all dirty, dusty, and I like really felt tired by the end of that day. But making it 2 days plus having it rain for a majority of the time that we were out there, we were all soaking wet, tired, and just like having the extra day as well, where you also are having to like lie to everyone and game the entire time and constantly be worried about your position. I was more exhausted than maybe I've ever been. Like there was a reason why, especially when we were starting the second day with an endurance challenge, I was like, I physically cannot try my hardest on this because if I go all out, I'm not gonna make it through the rest of this day. And like it helped that I didn't need it, but I was like, no, I need to conserve my energy. I like obviously we're doing things a lot more fast paced than they do on actual Survivor, but we're also not starving on an island. So I was like, I cannot imagine people doing this for the entire length of that game. Props to them.
Yeah, there's trade-offs for sure, because it was funny to me just be like, oh, this person's like eating a sandwich during this conversation. That was like genuinely funny to watch, but it's also like I think there are so many layers, and we'll hear from everyone else who has their hand up, but to me there are a lot of layers to this game, because not only is it shorter, but you're kind of all doing these things in succession. But on Jeff Probst Survivor, those people have never met each other and they never have to see each other again, and all of you know each other, and it's like there are implications after the game, like interpersonally, but also physically too. So I think that's one of the things that I was keeping in mind as a viewer, is it's probably hard to change, like be like, people on Survivor, they're a lawyer, they don't have to tell anyone that when they get to the island, but in your life that you all know each other. So that was interesting. Another part of like the mental toll that I'm sure it takes, where it's like, well, this is my friend, but you know, this is also a game. Max.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I felt the strain on day 2 like very hard. Like I started the day off feeling pretty good, like I slept decent, but it's just like the mixture of all of the physical activity plus the weather plus the fact that I was in recovery from bronchitis was not like a great combo. So like during that part like before like I got voted off, I was like pretty genuinely contemplating like just like bowing out. So because I was just so like mentally exhausted. But I didn't want to quit because that felt like a bad like way to go. So it kind of worked out that I got voted off so I didn't have to quit. So it was just like definitely I felt that a lot. Hopefully next time I won't be recovering from any type of illness. But so I hopefully I'll have a better showing next time.
And hopefully it'll be really sunny and warm next time too. Santino.
So Max mentioned it quickly, and you touched on it. Weather, I think, was just the biggest factor that I really didn't plan ahead for. I thought I proved myself in a lot of physical challenges as not only a good ally, but also a threat. But when it came to just being wet for most hours of the day, drying off, getting wet again, and then doing challenges while you're soaking wet and your body's just shutting down on you. It's a grueling process and it's stressful. It's just very stressful. But like I said before, I guess it's more of a learning experience because we're getting like a taste of what they do go through on actual Survivor. So each of these experiences is going to like change the outcome of our next gameplay because we don't know what could happen. Mother Nature could kick us in the balls. We don't know.
Yes.
I do think it was like oddly a very what I would assume is an accurate, like boiled down version of Survivor. I think the biggest thing was like it being 2 days meant that there was like a sleeping portion of the game where I think most of us got probably less than like 5 hours of sleep. I mean, we went to bed at like late into the night and I know some of us woke up at like 6 to make sure that we could like get ready before the game because Kay gave us incentives. She said, once you're outside and ready, you can start gaming. So a lot of people felt like, I think a lot of us woke up at like 6 o'clock to get ready so we could start talking about the game. And then not only with the sleeping aspect, we're primarily eating like snacky foods and doing a ton of physical activity. Like, not that we were starving or anything, but we were definitely burning a lot of energy that wasn't necessarily being replenished right away. And I think by the second day, most of us were fully running on adrenaline. And that is why we started to get so crazy by the second day, especially like the second half of the second day. My favorite part of the episodes is when Allie's like Jack, I'm so tired, but I'm so amped up. I feel like that accurately describes the way that we were all feeling by that second half of the second day.
Yeah, I know
Allie.
we'll
Yeah.
have a lot
Okay.
of stories to share. I just want to like for timing purposes, I think we're gonna move on from this. But I like what you were saying about Jess, how there's like a sleeping portion, there's that night portion, right? And that is where Grant's fire making skills were kind of showcased. Grant, was that like a thought in your brain that this could have a negative repercussion on your game?
No, I was just there to have fun and do those. I was gonna do that. Everyone be around the fire. It was a really fun night. Everyone hanging out, eating snacks, kind of bonfire stuff. So I was more in the mindset of just having fun with everybody. But I know you said to move on, but I really want to touch on what Jess said because like I agree completely. Kind of taking what everyone has said. Everyone knows when you do Survivor, like the two big things are the actual challenges and the scrambling. And then you kind of know that you have to prepare for some sort of fatigue, but actually doing it is completely different from just knowing I'm going to be tired. And like Jess says, once you get to that point where you're so out of energy and that adrenaline kicks in, regulating that is a whole different challenge from just the fatigue. Because then you start doing things you wouldn't normally do. You start getting the Buckygate incidences. You get Allie literally screaming in my face, or the big speeches at the final tribal. And it's even as you're doing it, you're like, what am I doing? What am I saying? You come out of yourself a little bit. And it's I think for people who are going to show up in future challenges, I don't know how it was in Manhattan, how tired you were during that, but I think people in Skaneateles who have that experience of being that low energy and running on those fumes will be a big advantage in the future. Sorry to kind of go off from the fire thing, but I really wanted to add on to what Jess said. I thought it was really good.
And we definitely will talk about the final tribal, don't you worry. I do want to just clarify, because in that scene where Grant is making the fire, he has a flint and steel that he brought himself. So there was this huge misconception that I was going to make everyone use flint and steel to make fire. And I think we can all agree that not Jess, Allie and Gabby probably would have been there for the rest of eternity if we had done that. All right, so we'll move on. Frankie,
Yeah.
go.
Sure. And then so this is also something that just like watching the whole first season and then thinking about the second season, I love Survivor. I also love shows like The Challenge too. It seems like on shows like The Challenge, when there is a season with returning players and new players, the new players always seem targeted and the returning players kind of run the show. There were more what I refer to as a rookie. There were more rookies than returners this season. So y'all had the numbers. However, every returner made the merge as well as the final three. So this is for anybody. I would like to hear from Justin regarding this too, specifically. But coming into the game, did you anticipate as a new player, did you anticipate that being a disadvantage, or were you hoping to kind of approach that from a different way?
Yeah, like I definitely knew I was going to be at a disadvantage for just not ever doing Survivor before and not ever watching Survivor before. So I kind of just had to learn everything as we were going, and I had to even learn that like people were scheming in the first place, because in the beginning I was just kind of trying to like survive, I guess. But so I eventually figured all that out as I kept progressing through. Uh, but I also was then relying on the people who did have experience and their knowledge, and I was putting more trust into them because of that, which probably didn't help in the end when I get back. But yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that was something for me that I found interesting, just because this seasons of this version of Survivor are kind of like scaffolding, like it's more of a series, whereas the traditional Survivor is kind of more of an anthology. So even in some folks, I know that Jess mentioned last season in her kind of like pitch during Final Tribal as well. So it does seem like instead of just having those kind of individual experiences, even people on traditional Survivor like Rob or Sandra, or people who've played 4 or 5 times, it's people don't often say, oh well, on Micronesia they said this, but like they're going to play this differently. So that's also interesting to me, and I think it just kind of goes to the interpersonal aspect of you all knowing each other outside of this as well. So thank you all for your commentary on those things. We will now shift to Final Tribal, which was so fun to watch for me. I was very pumped. So when it comes to Final Tribal, so this is the final three's chance to earn your vote. So I would just love to hear from people kind of what went into formulating your question for the folks who were in the final three. Ella.
So the reason I chose my question, which I ended up kind of adjusting after I like heard everyone's speeches, was because to me, as I said earlier, I understood Allie's game, and so I really wanted to try and differentiate between Jess and Zach. And so asking each other, like, basically, like, what did they do better than the other person, was a way for me to try and figure that out and like have them tell not just me but the rest of the jury. But I do want to publicly apologize. I think that I was like mean to my friends, and I'm sorry about that. So, like we said, I think we made up, but I am sorry.
Thank you for sharing. Max?
When I went into Final Tribal with hearing everybody's statements, I didn't really have a question in mind because I wanted to hear what everyone said first before I came up with my question, because I felt that if I had something in mind, they'd probably answer it anyway. So I guess that's kind of why I landed on the asking Jess why she thought like her and Zach were so behind the scenes or whatever. At least I'm kind of paraphrasing, but because you know, as I had mentioned, I thought it was kind of obvious that they were, you know, together. But so that's just kind of why they kind of. I also felt like that also came off a little aggressive on my end too, because I was like, why did you think that? But so yeah, I'm just trying to. Tensions were still a little high, so especially since I was like, got like, yeah, that's what's going on. So, but yeah, I guess probably was just like a more reflection on the fact that I was newer. I didn't do anything about it because I guess I was kind of afraid to make any moves to maybe shake up what Jess and Zach had going on. So yeah, once Final Trial came and I heard that, I was like, well, it's too late to really make any difference now. So yeah.
Yeah, and again, this is obviously like we were talking about how the toll of the game like impacted it. And as we're discussing this, I think that's important to keep in mind that everyone's tired, everyone's a little cranky, we're all hungry. So Caroline, I would love to hear from you, and then we'll do Gabby after.
Yeah. I think going into Final Tribal, I knew a lot of other people had been playing a lot longer and were gonna feel like they had a more intense experience. So going into that, I really just wanted to know why each person should win, and everyone kind of said that in their speech. And so I really just wanted to know, who would you vote for? And then I just voted for that person. But I was gonna vote for Jess anyway, but just thought it'd be a fun question.
Sure, Gabby.
Sure. So I think for me, actually, and I mean, I certainly remembered feeling very, I guess, upset during the speeches, which was an interesting contrast because after having lost the fire challenge, I was like pretty satisfied with how things had gone down. I was like, I'm happy to be done. Like, I'm ready to see how this is going to pan out. So it was an interesting shift after hearing. And I think there was, for me, definitely like a level of reactance to this idea that everyone's perception of their game was that they had like controlled things that, to me, from my position, seemed like they were going to play out this way no matter what, which is not to discount other strategy that was going on. For me, it was more centered on the voting and the like question of whether the voting was unanimous or whether there was some persuasion that was going on. And I also think that I wasn't necessarily on the receiving end of a lot of the persuasion. So that's where I was coming from often with that. Although I deeply regret having asked that question. I did not want to, like, obviously don't want to hurt my friends. And my question was more to get at that perception issue. Like, how much did you really feel like you had been effective in convincing people of what to do, which for my perception wasn't necessarily the most important part of the strategy that everyone played, which I think did ultimately come more down to that like social game and holding alliances. And I think that that's totally fair. I think that that's exactly how you're supposed to play the game. So I would also like to apologize. I love all of you. And I think that everybody did an amazing job playing. And should be so proud of themselves, because it is just as hard as it is to like make it through those days. It's also really hard to have to feel like you're tricking people and that sort of thing. So I think that like it certainly took an emotional toll on the final 3 to get to that point. And so y'all did a nice job.
Yeah, and I know Grant, you have your hand up. I think just in the interest of time, I want to just keep things just going a little bit. And then maybe if we have time at the end, we can like loop back to it. Just to make sure we're kind of hanging on here. So another thing I was wondering about, when was coming into Final Tribal, and Caroline touched on this as well. How many people already knew who they were going to vote for on the jury? How many people knew who they were going to vote for coming into Final Tribal? Show of hands. Caroline. Yeah, and then were anyone's minds truly changed during Tribal just based off of what folks were saying? Grant, Max. And then were people just truly were people truly going in with an open mind as well? Yeah. Yeah, I think especially like what people have been touching on as well, just with, you know, conditions, lack of food, like, you know, that type of thing. You've all been really trying hard too. I think it's easy to come in feeling, you know, your mind's not necessarily as clear as it might be when things started. So I think that was something I was curious about as well. Just wondering if you're like, well, I'm gonna vote for this person and then that's it. Like anyone else can say anything, but that's it. And I know some just moving on as well, some other people have touched on this too throughout, so we won't have to spend a ton of time on it. But was it strange to watch this and like see yourself playing a game and see yourself making these choices? And how did you feel about the representation of yourself, as RuPaul would say, you know, don't blame it on the edit, like if you were making the choices you were making. So we'll start off with Grant.
Yeah, I immediately started working on my posture because damn, did I not like that. That was not fun to look at. But no, it's very interesting seeing what does make the cut and doesn't make the cut. I want to follow up on something Gabby said about her Final Tribal, about perception. And I don't know how it is with everyone else who was playing, but I thought an interesting moment, it was either the second or third episode, and Dylan talking about how he can't let things affect his storyline. And it was just a throwaway comment, but I'm sure everyone had an idea of like how the game was going and what their role in it was, and then how the final cut would look, and if their perception, if any resemblance of it makes it to the final cut. And it's very interesting to see, you know, what makes it, what doesn't make it, what things could color every single tribal or add to it or detract from it. And some of it is, you know, maybe a conversation just doesn't fit, there's not enough time, or if you're trying to, you know, make it entertaining for the viewer, if someone who just says, I'm voting for this person, it ruins the entire suspense. I don't know. I just found that very interesting as I was watching it. I have no idea how everyone else's experience of seeing that and seeing how their understanding of how things played out, how watching it might have changed that for them. I'm kind of rambling, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I want to add to that as the editor of this production. Obviously, yes, things were cut. But for the most part, I do think that the way that conversations happened were very accurately represented. I think there were things that were left out for, you know, suspense reasons. I think the person that probably got the least representation of the game they played was probably Zach. But so I do want to like shout out his game. But the reason for that was exactly what you said, Grant, is because every conversation he had with Zach was just like, this person's going. All right, cool. And I was like, well, I can't add that because now it's like, all right, so there's no suspense for this tribal council now. So if you were wondering where, like, what he was doing some of those episodes, like where he was, it's because he very clearly like knew what was going on with his collaborations with Jess.
Sure, and he said that too. He said he in the final tribal, he's like, I always voted the right way. So, I think that it's those like little things that you hear that maybe once or twice total in the season where it's like, like Zach mentioned that he voted correctly every time, so it doesn't necessarily make sense continuity wise, just for the viewer to see Zach being on top of every vote. Jess.
Yeah, I think my perception of the game was completely different than everybody else's perception of his game. I was like, once we got to the end game, I was really feeling like I needed to be the one to get rid of him because I thought that he was going to be the one that people were going to respect more at the final tribal council. Like I thought that I had no shot against him winning just because I was witnessing firsthand pretty much all the game moves he was making. And then coming to find out that everyone viewed me as the more dominant person in our duo was really surprising to me. So I think that was like my biggest perception, like completely turned on its head now going back, not only from the edit, but also from like even people's response to like the tribal council and, him not getting any votes at the final tribal because it seems like people put their votes out of the two of us onto me.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anyone else have any who I'll prioritize folks who have not spoken yet, but anyone else have any thoughts on final tribal before we head into a little bit of a surprise guest? Okay, well, I guess we'll just get right into the surprise guest then. Joining us now, drum roll please, whenever they are ready. It's Sia!
It's Sia.
Sia's here. Yeah, Sia's here.
I've been following along intensely throughout this whole game, and it brings me such joy to watch you all play. But there are a couple individuals that I feel could use some of my philanthropy. One, Sarat, whom I will be granting $10,000 because you guys almost killed him. And I don't know where Kay went, but I have a bone to pick with her. So
Kay is on the run from the law currently.
You will be receiving $10,000 check from me, Sia Perlin. Also, Muhammad, you were robbed. I can't believe that you were voted out. You were just a man with no plan. And I really enjoyed watching your game. And lastly, Zach, I agree that your game was not represented well in the edit, and I appreciate all the things that you did in collaboration with Jess, and you did things so subtly, even the edit couldn't see.
Well, thank you, Sia. I'm not sure where you've gone, but thank you so much for your feedback. And we know that Sia is a dedicated fan of Survivor, so for Sia to just take time out of her very busy schedule, and maintaining her hair, incredibly important. Oh my gosh, Kay has returned. What is Kay doing here?
Yeah, I dropped out of the call.
Oh my god, it must be your Wi-Fi, but wow. Thank you everyone for participating. I believe Kay has the announcement of fan favorite.
Yes.
At this time.
I have tallied the votes from our loyal fandom. And this is the top 4 in alphabetical order. Allie, Grant, Jess, and Justin. The 4, 3, and 2 spots were all tied. But the number 1, who won by 1 vote, is Allie.
Yay!
I don't have a cash prize for you. I heard that Sia gave out $10,000 to. I mean, that's great. There also was no cash prize for the winner of this game. So sorry, Jess and Allie, for winning things. But Sia didn't choose you.
Maybe we could fashion like a paper plate award or something. Okay. Well, thank you, Kay. Thank you, Sia, wherever you are. We would like to end today just if by the introduction of the next season of Survivor. So in the next season of Survivor, Kay will become a player, and the host and producer will be none other than Zach. So a little bit of a swap up. Zach, do you have like a little bit of a taste for us for next season?
I actually have a logo and a theme to announce so that we can kind of get a little taste. You know, with the $10,000 from Sia, the production budget is going to be amazing this next season. So we all know that Survivor is a game of taking risks. And so the next season, we really want to make sure that people are like all in a words, for taking risks. And did you see the logo? And kind of being willing to gamble their way to the end. And so the next season is Survivor All In. Woo! So it's going to be a completely gambling themed season where people need to take risks in order to make big moves and get to the end to win the game.
Thank you so much, Zach. And Zach and I have been chatting, and let me tell you, you are all in store for something huge, revolutionary, and magical. And before we all leave today, definitely keep your eyes peeled. There are maybe some things in store before next season, including some special guests. You might be hearing a little bit more from myself, in some way, shape, or form. But thank you all so much for being there. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your little Survivor fam here. And I thank you. You know what? I think that we all need to thank our game maker Kay as well, because blood, sweat, and tears. Seneca Crane has nothing on you, girlfriend. So thank you so much for everything, Kay, and thank you all for being here today. And congratulations again, Jess. And as well, Allie, our fan fave. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Justin was robbed.
Hey, married a contestant just like Jeff. I just want to point that out.
All right.
The game started.
The game has begun. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Survivor All In.